Welcome to Pub and Porch, Applied Stoicism in Modern Life, hosted by Adam Piercy and Mick Mulroy. Welcome back to Pub and Porch, Applied Stoicism. I'm your host, Adam. We're here with my co-host, Mick Mulroy. So today, this was an episode that Mick and I have been talking about in the week a little bit, which was to do an episode on the press. And essentially, I think a lot of people would call that the free press. But, in modern times, we've been hearing a lot of attacks on the press, things like fake news, things like that. But I think that there is a historical precedence to this conversation that has been around actually since the time of Stoicism was when it was really live. And there are a couple things that we're going to talk about today. But Mick, you are an analyst, a national security analyst, I think is how you described it with ABC News. So, I'd love to get your initial take on this as a member of the press in general, right? And as a member of someone, how do you view the press and their role as sort of in our society and whatnot?
Yeah, thanks, Adam. So greetings from Bozeman, Montana, where we're still down here doing our tactical training and winter warfare, etc. Although it's 58 degrees this week, which I don't know what is Celsius, but that's 30 degrees Fahrenheit or 28 degrees above of freezing, just to give you
Right. In
an
Fahrenheit.
indication of, that's not very good for winter warfare.
No.
But yes, you're correct. I'm an analyst, a national security and defense analyst for ABC News. So I'm not a journalist, but I am in the news and I've been doing this for 7 years. I also do foreign media almost every
Right.
day. So ABC and foreign media.
Yeah, you were on the Beeb recently. I think you were telling me you were on the BBC.
Yes, I do. The BBC, Al Jazeera, a lot of the Middle East stuff because a lot of stuff happens in the Middle East. So just putting into the context from my experience with the media. But I do think it's important to start off with, if you look at Stoicism, who's one of the main points of the philosophy is that everybody has the ability to reason. And not only the ability, which at the time, of course, was actually a significant statement, because only certain class of men were believed to have any relevance in society. And Stoicism came around and said, no, that's not the case. Well, it doesn't matter your gender or your race or ethnic group. Everybody has this capacity. And I think it's more than just having the capacity. I think it's having a requirement, right, to be actively engaged in your society and to basically, and Stoicism had a lot of logic originally, right? There was a whole frame of logic. So I think it's a requirement for Stoics to rationally decide issues based on the facts that are in existence, not the ones you prefer were in existence. And to really do that, you have to have accurate information. So that's where I'm headed to. In order to do that, this and we've seen this evolution. If you're my age, and I know you're younger than me, but there was a time when you probably remember this, your parents watched the nightly news.
Yes.
Like that was it. They read the newspaper in the morning and the nightly news for 30 minutes at night. Whether it's in the US, it was ABC, CBS, NBC, or from my parents used to watch PPAS NewsHour, right?
I remember that.
Which so I grew up watching it. That was it. You didn't watch 24-hour news. That didn't exist. And if you only have 30 minutes, and it's still the case, like, my kids have commented, like, you really just need to watch the nightly news because they don't have time to editorialize. They don't have time to put fluff in. They don't have time to put the clickbait. They got to just tell you the news, right? Because it's just. So that was kind of how everybody grew up in the United States until the 24-hour news cycle, and especially social media.
Yeah.
right? So now we're in a world
Yeah.
where, I mean, we have full-on propaganda channels that are masquerading as news, right?
Right.
And you can do that either by what you pick to highlight, like you only highlight the positive of a certain political perspective, or just
Right.
flat out manipulation of facts. And then, of
Totally.
course, everybody claims the other guy's news outlet because now it's more geared toward, your political affiliation is, but everybody says the other guy's news outlet is fake news, right? So
Right.
so we're headed down on a path that's problematic for two reasons. One, I just think there's a lot of nonsense being put out as news. It's just not factually accurate. So it's
Right.
hard to make a real determination of where you stand on something if you're not getting accurate information. I think we should talk about how this AI could potentially help that.
Sure.
Can it identify just total BS and just
Yeah.
take it out of your feed? That's what I'd like.
Sure.
Um, and then, of course, this idea of controlling the media. Like we're seeing FBI
Right.
raids on Washington Post journalists. We're seeing, um, journalists arrested for covering incidents, where people were protesting ICE, for example.
Yeah.
I don't have a determination on that one, but ultimately, there needs to be a protection of the free press in order for it to actually be press. If it's not protected, if it's simply
Right.
dictated by the state, it's not the free press. It is propaganda. So anything that I think any society, not just to talk about mine, can do to protect the freedom of the press is absolutely essential to a democracy because it is, at the end of the day, the consent of the governed.
Yes.
So, from a Stoic perspective, which as anybody listens, link closely to democracy and the development of democracy, but from the
Sure.
Stoic perspective, freedom of the press is absolutely essential to a
Absolutely.
society that is governed by the people.
Absolutely. And I think this is a good segue into doing a little bit of a history check here, because I think a lot of people hear conversations like the one you and I are having, and they think it's not really applicable to the modern time. Yes, we have social media nowadays and stuff like that, but a lot of what's going on today in the press is not is just variations on some things that existed before. So I'm going to quickly throw out some stuff. We're not going to get too technical here, but um, the first real newspaper actually was a Roman gazette, essentially, or
Oh,
daily
no kidding.
pamphlet that came out. And it was started by Julius Caesar. It was called the Acta Diurna. And it came out in 59 BCE, and it lasted until 222. So when you
Wow.
think about the core Stoic people that we talk about, right, the big three of the Romans, at least, Marcus, Seneca, and
Hmm.
Epictetus, they lived through the middle of the height of this daily piece of paper, basically. And so Caesar started it. And it's interesting because he started it because Caesar was a member of the popularis, right? So he was not what's
Hmm.
called an optimate. So he was not an elite. He was for the people, was his push. And his belief was that everyone should know what was going on in the Senate. And so this
Sure.
gazette included everything from what they voted on and even what they debated that day, not even voted on. But it also included things like birth and death notices and no other tax changes or whatever. And it would come out. So, that's the thing is having it like diurna is it's one of those words that eventually, starts to form like daily, right? And it starts to
Hmm.
come out where this is a regular thing that's happening, right? And so there's a historical precedent for having reporting on what's going on in your government, because Caesar was a popularis. This was a big push for him, right? And we say Gaius Julius Caesar, not the other Caesars later, the first
Hmm.
one. And the whole thing, though, is that you did have the ability to know what they were doing every day, and it was posted in a public place, and it would be copied, and it would be sent to the provinces, and it would be spread around like that. So is it the Globe and Mail, or sorry, the Globe and Mail is the Canada's newspaper. I'm trying to think.
Oh, okay.
The Times, is it the
New York
Times or the
Times,
Globe? Right,
Washington
exactly,
Post.
right.
Yeah.
The New York Times, the Washington Post. That's been in the news a lot recently, right? And the thing
Hmm.
is that is it like that? No, but is it like that? Well, yes, in other ways, right? And then there's a couple things I want to just preface some of our conversations on. So back in the time period, right? Um, People did write opinion pieces, right, which was part of the news. If you look at um, The Republic by Plato, if you look at
Yeah.
De Ira by Seneca, if you look at Cicero, who wasn't really a Stoic, but like friend of the Stoics, friend of the
Friend of the
podcast,
Stoics.
Cicero,
Yeah.
he
Yeah.
talked. He wrote a he wrote a treatise called De Officiis, which means on duties. De Ira by Seneca is on anger, and they're writing
Yep.
this in a time where it's a mixture of descriptions of things for yourself, things for the average person, but it's also a commentary on what's going on at the time. And we have opinion pieces now. I mean, I love there's a whole, like the Globe and Mail, which is the Canadian sort of centrist newspaper. Most people would say it isn't, but it is. Um, the centrist newspaper has a whole opinion section that you take out. Like there's enough opinions in there that it's one of those things. And the thing is these are journalists, right? That are like they're similar to you in a way. They have a specialty that they know about, and so they're giving an opinion based on the facts that they know, and then they're giving an opinion, and it's called an opinion piece. But it's so we know that it includes someone's subjective opinion, but it has facts in it, right? And then at the same time, I'll say one last thing, which is part of the free press to me includes some of the groups that you're hearing. And we have done some talks on freedom of speech before, but you hear things like comedians getting kind of censored or TV shows getting pulled from the air and things like that. Well, back in the day, right, they used to have satire as just satire was a part of the public life.
Mm-hmm.
There's a famous
Mm-hmm.
satirist during the time of Marcus Aurelius named Lucius, and he wrote about everything. And he wasn't really a comedian. But he would satirize what was going on with a lot of sarcasm. Like, well, obviously, the best way to deal with this is to cut the guy's head off. But that's just me. And
Mm-hmm.
but interestingly enough, the things for today where you have sarcasm and satire happening on shows that that are about political commentary. I think it's really important to say that this is also not new, and I think the Stoics in that circumstance, they were op-ed people, right? They were people who would speak about what was going on. And so I just wanted to give a little bit of historical context here because this is one of the ones that actually does have some very strong parallels with the modern period today. And I think the rest of the conversation can talk about our view on it, but ultimately, these are real things that happened. And the act of Diurna, I think it only stopped because it kind of died out. I don't remember I don't remember learning that it had been banned, but it
Sure.
lasted for 270, 280 something years, right? That's pretty good. Most of the newspapers
Yeah.
today, like the Globe and
Totally.
Mail, right? I'll reference Canada's newspaper, and I do love that newspaper. It was actually it's actually relatively young because it was a merger of the Globe and the Mail, and those two
Mm-hmm.
newspapers merged. Um, and now it's the Globe and Mail, and it's been around for like I don't know, I can't remember. I think it's about 80 years or 60 years or something like that. It's like that's nothing compared to that. So, anyways, a little bit of background from me, not too much technical
That was
stuff,
really
but
interesting. And you think about it. So Julius Caesar, which obviously was a dictator, still thought that the people needed to know what's going on, right?
yeah,
I'm
yeah,
sure you weren't allowed to, criticize him. I'm guessing,
right,
but the fact that he started it and he felt like the common man and woman needed to know what's going on in the Senate says a lot, right? So
yeah,
it's been part of our society or civilization, if you will, for a long period of time, and it needs to stay that way. It was so important to the founding fathers of my country that it's enshrined in the Bill of Rights, right? So the First Amendment specifically says, in addition to freedom of speech,
yeah,
freedom of the press, but they said it separately, so it's not one and the
yeah,
same. So there's actually a protected category for people who are part of the media,
right,
of the news, right?
right,
Um, and that in addition to informing people of what's going on in the world so they can help uh, shape the policy going ahead through their elected leadership, it also
yeah,
holds public people and even private people to account, right? The
yeah.
media is who exposes a lot of corruption.
That's right.
If it wasn't for them, a lot of the stuff would be hushed up. And if they
Yeah,
can't do that, if they're worried about the other threat to the media now is every time they put something out, they get sued. They
Yeah.
get sued by people who are in positions of power. Now,
Yeah.
if it's up to the jury to decide whether they made a mistake and are liable, but
Right.
it's also a way to threaten the media. I will
Yeah.
sue you. I will pull your license. Right. That's also been threatened recently. It's like
Yeah.
if you don't say the right things, I will get
Yeah.
the FCC to pull your license. These are all significant threats to the media, which means freedom of the press, which means an informed citizenry
Yeah.
is
And it's
under threat.
absolutely. And I think it's interesting because this is a factual thing that happened. So I'm not making an opinion on it, but this factual thing that happened was there was a discussion. I think there was a Senate Oversight Committee or something, and they were investigating the FCC, and there was there was sort of there was a question raised about I don't know if it's loyalty is the right word, but there's a question made about the oath that someone in that position takes, and that oath is to the Constitution, right? That oath is not
Yes.
to a person, right?
Every oath in the U.S. is to the Constitution, not any
Right.
person. Yes.
Right. So then, in that way, I think it kind of implies that situation where you are removing the subjective or personal nature of, like, choosing what you say or don't say. Like, you either have the freedom of the press or you don't, and that's kind of the way that I have viewed that myself. But anyway, sorry, I digress. It was just that was an interesting one because we get so much talk nowadays about things that feels very polarized, and it's sort of like, well, this document, the Constitution, and Canada has a constitution as well, is very much something that it's meant to be kind of objective, like you can do these things or not. Like that's what it says. Anyways, that's my simplification of it. But so
So
so what
the,
do you?
going
Oh, sorry. Go ahead. You go ahead.
going back to I mean, because I've asked people who are experts in artificial intelligence, because I
Yeah.
would totally want a news feed that identified false information.
Yeah.
And the person told me, when it can be done, it already is being done to a certain extent, but it
Yeah.
could be
Like Grok
better.
on Twitter.
Yeah. But what they explained to me is a lot of the social media platforms don't want it. Why? Because people are on it because of the algorithms that they send them. And a lot of it is based on outrage, right?
Right.
So people tend to stay glued to their device because they
Yeah.
keep hearing things that align with their political views, but not just align with their political views, piss them off, right?
Right.
And so,
Yeah.
generally speaking, um, to piss somebody off, you have to exaggerate or fabricate the information, generally speaking. You see what I mean? This is what the
Yeah.
person explained to me. So if they had like an AI device that was on your Twitter or Blue Sky or whatever you listen
Yeah.
or watch or whatever you call it,
Hmm.
use, um, most of the clickbait would be thrown out.
Right.
It'd just be thrown out. You wouldn't have the crazy accusations and false statements and all that stuff. It would
Hmm.
just be. Now I would prefer that, and I think it would be healthy for everybody because it'd be, you just read the news
Right.
and move on with your life and go talk to a real human and stuff. Um,
Yeah.
and I'm not saying I've mastered this, but I do know it's a problem.
Yeah. I haven't. Yeah.
Right? I'm
Yeah.
literally, believe me, my friends, I listen to the news all day, right? Because I'm on the news. I could go on the news at
Yeah.
any time, so I gotta be able to speak coherently. Um,
Sure.
but I also hear from people, which is probably true, is that is not necessarily a healthy thing, is to listen to the news all day because it's not the good news, right? It's the world's coming to an end news, basically. So
Right.
I,
Right.
I digress a little bit, but just
No.
trying to highlight to people that a healthy way is to hear the news, listen to the news, the factual news, make your own
Yeah.
determination, and then move on from social media and nonstop news. Except for me, because I have to listen to news.
Yeah. I
Save
mean,
yourself. That's what I'm saying.
there.
Save yourself.
Well, sure. I mean, there is at some point you have to turn it off, right? You have to turn it off and move forward with whatever you're doing. I mean, that's a known thing. That's like with anything. We all like, but I think there's two key topics we should talk about here, which is I do think there's a duty about the news, not just about the news reporting factual information and not making things worse and stuff like that, in the sense of like um exacerbating the situation by overdoing something or whatever, embellishing information that's maybe just on the
Yeah.
edge of correct or whatever it is. So I do think that's true, but at the same time, I think it's really important that there's a duty for us as people, right, to be part of the citizenry to figure out what to do next when we choose to act within the communities that we are in. Like when I like I think a lot of people do this, right? They might start to think like, what's my, like, I'm going to do some charitable contributions this year, for example, right? If you it's easy to know which ones are sort of simple to give money to, things like the food bank or Meals on Wheels or something like that, right? Those are what I would say generally easy. But what I think, this is a very simple one, but in one duty we might have is to, if you read the news, you can start to learn where there are challenges within the society in which you live, right? Like if there's if we struggle with, you know, uh, like I know that scouts and guides in Canada, like Boy Scouts, Girl Guides in Canada, has struggled
Mhm.
recently, right? Financially and with, volunteers and stuff like that. And, I found that out through the news. And it's going to feel like a stretch, but ultimately, like, if I know that I believe that having good organizations for kids to learn life skills and make good friends and have it be structured and stuff like that, then I might choose based on that to provide my financial contribution to something different than just the usual ones, like the food bank and the you know the people that help the homeless or something like that. And I'm not saying don't give to those organizations, but how can you make a decision as a person on things like what you're going to vote about, what you're going to do as a citizen of that area, municipality, region, whatever, if you don't really know what's going on. And I do think it's a duty that Stoics would see, that to at least know what's going on. At some point you have to stop and make a decision, but I think there is a duty there, because you talk about reason and rationality. Like, how can you make a reasoned decision about who you're going to vote for? And we'll not just talk about executive positions like presidents or prime ministers, who you're going to vote for your school district, right? For your
Mhm.
sheriff, for your, city planners. I don't know. It depends on where you are. You can vote for different people in different areas, right? How are you going to do that if you don't know what's going on? You'll just be dealing with your small microcosm of information that's in your mind. And I think the duty that's there, the question then comes up is like, well, how would you do that? Well, that's what the press is for, right? That's what that is for. People are finding out this information and providing it out to other people. Is it always perfect? No. Does that mean we should say everything is fake news? No. But getting information and then making a decision on it based on reason and facts, I think, is a very Stoic concept. Did Seneca or Epictetus say you should read the news every day? No, but they did say that you should, question things, make reasoned decisions, and then proceed. And I think, the question is, how do you do that if you're not? And it's not. I'm not saying read the paper even, like, but knowing what's going on in the news. That's what is knowing what's going on in the world, and that's what the press is for, in my opinion. So that's the first part,
Yeah.
um, which is duty. I'd love to know your take on that, though, because as someone who provides, analysis for this stuff, I feel like you're uniquely positioned in this way because you're the one providing information, right?
Yes.
You're not
And I'm
positioning it a
trying to
certain
put
way,
it
or maybe
into
you are.
Yeah, generally the way it works is so the journalist present the information. Like I'll be on
Right,
with a journalist who's
right,
in Gaza, for example, right? Um, they say what's going on. I then comment on it, and I try. Sometimes it's there. In my opinion, there's only one way to look at something really, but I try to put
sure,
both views, right, and let the person who's watching the program make the decision.
right,
Like for example, it's hard to come up with an example immediately, but um, oh, okay, like well, I'll just use Gaza, right? So there was a question on how heavy-handed the Israeli Defense Forces have been prosecuting the war in Gaza, right?
sure,
So when I'm asked about that, 70 plus thousand people have been killed. I will comment on it from the Palestinian side, as a person
Right.
who's been in a lot of conflicts, and from the IDF side. So, and then I let
Right.
people determine, from the Palestinian side, it's almost indiscriminate bombing. From the Israeli side, Hamas hides in civilian populations and
Right.
screens itself. But so, if I'm asked specifically on that topic, then I'll give my answer. But I try to be balanced to the point where it's really up to the person that's watching it to determine, where they think the truth lies, if you will. Because at the end of the day, it's the truth that matters, right? I know
Yes.
people like to use that as a cliche, but so I have a quote here from Mr. Marcus Aurelius. If someone is able to show me that what I think or do is not right, I will happily change, for I seek the truth,
Right.
by which no one was ever truly harmed. So, a quote that they use often with him. But I think
Hmm.
that's the key to Stoic reasoning is your ability to change your mind. If you can't change your
Right.
mind, then you're actually not reasoning. You're simply uh, dogmatic in the way you view the world, and facts
Right.
don't essentially matter to you. And
Right.
what I would say in the modern world, for those that are practitioners of Stoicism, next time you see something on a social media, before you repost it, find out if it's true.
Right.
Because a lot of people, even you talk to friends and go, "I saw what you posted. Is that true?" Like, I don't know. I just posted it. Well, I
Yeah.
mean,
The
I
share
mean,
button is really quick. The
yeah.
share button is
I mean,
so
to
easy
be
to
fair, we
use.
probably both have done that, right? We just assume
Yeah.
either we assume it's true or we really don't care it's
Yeah.
true because it just promotes whatever we think anyway, right? So
Sure.
to be truly stoic, the truth matters. So
Yeah.
it's a lot quicker to do this now, right? You see some post,
Oh,
and then you go
it's
to
one
AI
button.
and you go, is this true? And then it goes, absolutely
Yeah.
not. And you go like, so
Yeah.
to me, as a stoic, you have an obligation to do that, not
Right.
just promote your position. If it's not
Sure.
even accurate, then it's disinformation. The other thing
Right.
I'd point about modern life, especially it's a big problem for democracies, um, is the disinformation that comes from adversaries.
Yeah.
Right? We now have,
Yeah.
I mean, especially the Russians. They get
Yeah.
on all the social media platforms because they're completely unrestricted. In fact, in the U.S., they're basically protected from liability.
Hmm.
Right? There's a
Yeah.
law that protects, for some reason, tech companies, not newspapers, but tech companies from all the kind of crap that's posted about individuals and stuff.
Right.
But the Russians, for example, and a lot of adversaries, but them in particular, exploit it. So they have
Sure.
thousands of fake accounts promoting the most ridiculous things that somehow Americans believe, like QAnon, for example. If you think I'm exaggerating, go read about QAnon, and then you'll go, "Oh, Mick wasn't
Yeah.
exaggerating," because there are people that believe it, right? I
Yeah.
actually think they started that going, "There's no way the Americans are going to believe this," and now they're probably laughing. They're probably laughing,
Yeah.
going, "Oh my
Either
god,
that
they
or
believe it."
they did it
Yeah,
as a way to say, look over there. That's somewhere else. Anyways.
yeah. But anyway, the point being is, as a Stoic, I think you have an obligation if you're going to put something out there that you at least verify it's true. And then
Yeah.
be cautious because a lot of autocratic governments who completely control the narrative in the media in their country are
Yeah.
exploiting freedom of the press in ours. So don't be a puppet. Don't just
Right.
promote crazy conspiracy theories because you think it's interesting. You're actually um, damaging the fabric of your society, often at the hands of a disinformation campaign by like Russian intelligence.
Oh, for sure. And this is one of those interesting things though that also isn't new. It's very new today in how quickly they can bombard you with it because social media has this rapidity to it where it's like there's a million bots or there's monkeys in a cage somewhere just typing out this hate speech about stuff or disinformation. But like it's known that um, during the time of Pericles, for example, the Athenians and they had sort of formed this thing called the Delian League.
Yeah,
Um,
yeah,
and and what was interesting was there was all this there was sort of this slanderous information about about Pericles and whatnot that came out, and there was all this stuff about that, where essentially what you find out later is it was sort of like Sparta was like not okay with the Delian League, and they're like, look, we're not. I know I'm probably misremembering this, but I do know that Pericles had this sort of slanderous stuff that was happening about him, but at the same time, he's like your greatest general. He's trying to protect you in this time. It's tough because there's probably some truth to that, but I mean, they definitely were. I know, for example, that he was getting attacked. I mean, everybody gets attacked in some ways, by people that don't have the right information. But I think you're right. There's absolutely a need to look at truth. Socrates, who was our progenitor, right, for
Mm-hmm.
that's his
Godfather.
Stoics, right, the
Goes with it.
Socratic method, right. I mean, the key thing you do, is you come up with a theory, right, but you got to prove it,
Mm-hmm.
and you have to look at information that not only proves it but disproves it, and you have to look at it all. At some point, there's an exercise you do, and I do this with my team in the space program, where we'll make a claim, and I'll say, so what's the opposite of that? Like, is that true? Like, how do you know that this is true?
Mm-hmm.
And that doesn't mean that we just take things willy-nilly. I think it's a good exercise to sometimes say, like, so, because detail is very important in safety, right? Like, either there's a redundancy or there isn't, or there's a control or there isn't. And then you go, so what I do with the team is sometimes I say, well, flip it around. How does it read? What is it saying? What's is this true? Is your statement clear enough that no one can flip it the other way? And truth in my world is sometimes very quantitative, right? It's like, you have X factor of safety, or it's going to meet this force level or whatever. But then there's also the other side of it, of like, you have to portray that to someone, and then you have to ask yourself, like, is this true? I mean, going back to the classic Marcus quote of like, if it is not true, do not say it, right? But I think this is one of those things that we have to do, is we have to ask these questions of ourselves and the information that we get. It is too simple nowadays to share. I'll be honest with you. It's like a one button, and you're just like, stop posting this stuff. I hear so many things nowadays about space program because Artemis 2 launch was pushed back and all this stuff. And I'm not calling you out. I don't think you did something wrong, but you did share something with me from Twitter about a journalist who asked a question about the space program and
Yeah.
the Artemis 2 launch. And I did look at it, and I thought, okay, this is funny because, I felt like the tweet was kind of saying that I felt like it was being turned into a situation where it was like, journalist exposes huge problem on space program. And it was like, no, it's a good question that she asked, but I mean, I'll be more specific. It was a question around why are we still having problems with fueling liquid hydrogen rockets in
Yeah.
2025, 6. But, you know, I think it's a great question, and I think we should never stop asking that question. But the thing you and I have to remember, and other people have to remember, is hydrogen is mostly proton. It's one proton. It's usually labeled as H plus, and it's H2 when it's
Mm-hmm.
it's LH2 when it's in liquid form. But it's tiny. It's so small that like it can go through hermetic seals that we have in medical devices and things like that, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I don't want to go into that too much, but it's just a little bit of context. So the thing is, I think the lady's question was perfect. And I saw the NASA answer and it was very clear. But at the same time, to then to have someone take, like, because the objective statement there is, reporter asks really good question about liquid hydrogen leak on Artemis 2 vehicle.
Mm-hmm.
That's really the objective statement. But it got turned into this, like, massive hole in vehicle, and you're like, no, no, that's not what happened, right? That's not what happened. And actually, I liked that we had a bit of a text exchange on that, because it was one of those things I came back to when I was thinking about this. So we do have to question these things that we see, even when you get it from a reputable source. And
Yeah.
I'll just quickly
I
say,
think it was I mean,
oh,
sorry, go ahead.
I'll just quickly segue on one thing, because I saw a film on the weekend that I really enjoyed called Truth, which is Kate Blanchett and Robert Redford. It's about the Dan Rather story, of they broke a story, and then it turned out that there was some questions that were still unanswered on some of the evidence they were using, and it ended up causing mass resignations, basically. And Dan Rather resigned because of this story.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm not going to take an opinion on the story or the Dan Rather thing, but I will say there's a great line in it where Kate Blanchett, who's the producer for the story, she says, "Why should we be slapped for asking the question?" And I kind of going, that's a great point. And then I texted you and said we should do an episode on
Mhm.
free press because the
Yeah.
question is really the thing, right? So go ahead.
And in that story, although, I mean, I don't know if former President Bush got, special treatment to get into the Guard.
No idea.
At the
No
time,
idea.
the Guard was kind of a safe haven. Now it's
Right.
not, right? Just to be fair, the National Guard served in 20 years in Afghanistan and Iraq. But
Right.
they didn't. I don't think they got slapped for asking the question. They got slapped for falsifying records.
Right.
Right? They
There
put
was, and
something
that's part of the
out
movie.
that was
Yeah.
proven to be fabricated. I don't know if they knew it was fabricated or not, um, but that goes to the
Right.
if they did it purposefully, then
Great point.
obviously that is
That's
not
bad.
news.
That's
That
bad.
is that
Yeah.
is pure propaganda. So you don't
Right.
like the president, so you fabricate something. When in fact you might actually have an accurate story. I don't know. I don't know. Like you,
Yeah.
I'm not making a determination. But as
Me
soon
neither.
as you do
But
something falsely, either purposefully or through negligence, then the truth
mhm.
of your story kind of goes out the window,
Yeah.
quite frankly. So the press,
Mhm.
I mean, the press should be held to account for sure, because
Sure.
especially nowadays, I mean, I'm biased, but I see behind the curtains, for example, at the outlet I work for, I don't see a bias. I'm never told what to
Right.
say. I'm never ever. But then I
Right.
think everybody knows that there's certain media outlets that are 100% supporting one side or the other. Like even if they're
Right.
honest, they simply
Right.
it's they what they choose to highlight is always positive for their side and always
Yeah.
negative for the other side.
Yeah.
So and that's also because people want to be reinforced in their own beliefs and they want
Mhm.
to be pissed off at the other side.
Yeah.
So that I don't think is at all where Stoics should find themselves when it comes to their consumption of the news. They should actively
Yeah.
look for unbiased media. Um,
Yeah. Totally.
and we do this because I keep the news on. I already mentioned, but
Yeah.
my business partner, we tend to switch the channel throughout the day to
Right.
see both
Ah,
sides.
yes. I
And
wanted to talk about this. Yeah.
yeah, and
Well,
it's almost like they're talking about two entirely different realities.
exactly. Yeah, because I had some people who were kind of like, "Well, what are you supposed to do in this circumstance?" And I love to talk about it from the perspective of, you say change the channel, like but the change the channel is not change the channel to ignore it, which is something I want to talk about as well. But it's changing the channel to figure out what somebody else is saying.
Yes.
Like I very like growing up in Europe and whatnot. I'm used to the beep of BBC News, right? You know
Yeah,
the
I
beep,
love
right? It
BBC
leads in. I
News.
love
Yeah,
that beep.
until ABC. Yeah.
And but the thing is like I see like this is something I do literally do this when major stories are breaking, right? It's like, it'll come up on my feed, it'll be from the Globe or the CBC or the Post or the Times or something like that. And then I'll immediately check the BBC, excuse me. Or
Mhm.
I'll just check another source, right? And it
Sure.
takes 3 seconds, but you're right. Like, for example, during the election, when the results were coming in, right? CNN had a great graphic on it. I didn't check ABC. I apologize, but
Mhm.
but I was checking CNN. But then as soon as I saw it, I went to the Beeb and just saw if there was anything coming out over there. Now that's a little bit tough because they don't track it the same way, but it gave me the ability to see what other people were saying. And you're right. It's sometimes two entirely different dialogues, right? And
Mhm.
I think it's important for people to just do that. In some ways, I find it's too easy to do that now. Like when it was just the age of newspapers, and I should say I always get a Saturday paper newspaper because I love a paper newspaper. I don't know, it's just a
Mhm.
nostalgia thing maybe, but I do read it back to front. But back in the day of paper newspapers, you had to like buy a few, right? And you had to take them
Yep.
home and like read them all. But the thing is that it allowed you to take a step away from the story and see what somebody else is saying about it, and that's really important. Like, if you watch if you do look at newspapers for major world events, right? um Major, I won't cite any specifically, but if you take, back in the day when newspapers were really 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 important before computers and the internet, if you look at two of them for major world events, we'll say the end of World War II or Pearl Harbor or the nuclear bombing attacks on Japan, for example. If you take the Post and Times next to each other, they don't have the same headline, right? And you make your own decision about that. It's just like I've been saying about that movie I saw. Make your own decision about it. I'm not going to tell you my opinion, but it gives you this ability to say, am I right here or am I wrong? Like, what do I really feel about it? And I think that's a very Stoic thing to do, is ask yourself, like, where's the truth lie? That's how reason comes in.
Totally.
I want to jump on one topic though about this, which I would love your opinion on, which is I get a lot of people who it feels very isolationist with the news. They see the news and they know that it's horrible or
Mhm.
something like that when something bad happens. And then they say, well, I can't change this. So they sort of distance themselves away from it and they shut it off and then they forget about it or ignore it. And I'm curious what your take on is that, because no, you know what? Let's leave it there. So I'd love to hear your take on that. This idea
Sure,
of,
that's a good
you
question
know,
because there's two things that Stoicism would say on this topic, I think. Two main things,
yeah,
right? The first part, which I think we talked about last week,
yeah,
if you can't change it, what good is it to just constantly worry about it, right? But in order to get there, you have to make a full assessment on whether you can really change it or not, right? So if you're saying, oh, I'm a citizen, what can I do about the decisions made by the president? Well, you can do a lot. So
yeah,
don't make it a cop out either, right? You can, promote your views. You
yeah,
can promote people going into public office that promote the views that
yeah,
you hold. You can go into public office. I would love to see a lot more Stoics going into public office.
yeah,
I think it would be a duty, except for I don't want to do it. But so you have to make that determination first. Like,
yeah,
is it really something I can't do anything about? And if the answer
yeah,
is yes, then I would concur with people saying, then why am I going to sit here and fret and beat my head against a wall about something I have nothing? But if it is something that you can do something about, whether it's community activism, volunteering, any of that stuff, I think
yeah,
as a Stoic, you have the obligation to do it. But I do under also, it's part of it is unplugging, which is
yeah,
also valid just in general, is you don't have to be attached to the world all the time. You
yeah,
know, go in the woods, walk around,
yeah. Go
just
skiing.
be there.
Yeah,
Yeah, there's a term, right? What's the term for being present? I guess it's being present, right?
yeah.
Because we're always, because of
Or
our
mindfulness
connectivity
type
with
of thing.
everything, mindfulness kind of, yeah, mindfulness,
Yeah,
yeah.
yeah. Okay.
Where, now we're constantly somewhere else. Um,
Yeah,
whether it's looking
yeah.
at the media or texting people or doing whatever I mean, it's a cliche, but one time I was walking to work and I was watching all these people and they were literally like zombies looking at their phone, right? And they're like
Hmm.
almost
Yeah.
walking into traffic, walking into stop signs and
Right.
shit. And I was like, what's wrong with these people? And then I got to work. I'm like, why is that normal? And then I realized I forgot my phone. So I forgot my phone.
Yeah.
That's why I noticed all these people staring at their
Yeah.
phone. And of course, I was being super critical of them when
Because
in
you weren't
fact,
looking at your phone. Yeah.
I wasn't looking at my phone, right? So
Yeah.
hold yourself to account. I know we're getting a little off the
Yeah.
freedom of speech here, but hold yourself to account. Like
Well,
if you could tell your kids to like unplug and put the phone into the,
yeah.
the drawer, do it yourself. Like set the
Yeah.
example.
Well, I think we have to talk about this though, because the consumption of the stuff from the press is a thing we all do every day. I try to do it where I have a set time in the day because I do a Globe and Mail. Sorry, I'm pushing the Globe today. I do a digital subscription 7 days a week, right? And so
Mhm.
I set aside a little bit of time and I go through it and I don't read every article. I definitely look at every article. I want to know what's happening, but then I kind of park it because like people like Marcus say stuff where they're like, or I think it's Seneca or like, you know what? I can't remember who it is, but there's a prominent Stoic who said something like, at some point you have to stop reading and just go do the thing, right?
Yes.
It has to stop being study and be applied, and that's where we
Yeah.
are today here together.
Stop
But I
talking
think
about
that's
being a
really
good man and be one,
exactly
right?
just be one,
Yeah.
and I think that's a really important take on it. But I think that's that's really an important thing to say, though, is how we ingest this, because the news, it just seems to get worse as the more you watch it. Not that worse things are happening in the world, it's just the dialogue changes. And so the
News.
consumption of media is, I think it's a great topic to talk about, because that sort of circles around everything. But yeah. Anyways, I think this is probably a good spot for us to park it. But this is another one where I'd love to get people from the audience in on this one, because um, Mick and I kind of like I work. We're sort of two ends of the spectrum. Mick's in the media, and I'm not really. But and so that's it. But I'd love to hear how people apply this in the regular world, because I think as well, Mick and I, we probably have somewhat similar views on the press and how we ingest that. So info@pubandporch.com. Would love to hear from you. Comment in the video. We never really say that, the Shalika scribe, right? Like, I'm not going to pitch for that, but we'd love to hear from you. We'd love to hear how this fits in your worlds, because ultimately, especially with social media today, it's never going to go away. So, any closing thoughts today, Mick?
No, so my clothing thought would be, make sure that you find the truth before you decide your perspective. Don't
Hmm.
don't just willy-nilly repost something that you're not, don't believe is actually accurate or know is accurate.
Right.
And take time to actually just disconnect sometimes.
Sure.
Do as
And
I
I'll
say,
say,
not as I do.
do as I say, not as I do. And I'll say, as we go through consuming all this media, head in the icebox, heart in the oven. Let's make sure we don't fly off the handle for something we read. So, thanks, Mick. Good conversation today. We'll see you and everyone else in the next one. Cheers.
Sláinte. Thank you for listening to the Pub and Porch podcast. If you'd like to find out more about the podcast or its host, head over to pubandporch.com, and you can listen to all our episodes on Spotify, Apple, or whichever platform you prefer. And if you'd like to help out with the podcast, you can find us on Patreon. Drop us an email if you have a comment on any past episode, you have a suggestion for future episodes, or you have an essay on an important topic for Stoicism. Send it to us, and then we can be reached at info@pubandporch.com. Today's music was provided by bensound.com. Until next time, Pub and Porch out.